Welcome to True Crime Boss. I'm Jarrett Ferrantino, and this is episode 10. I can't believe we're at episode 10 already. First, I want to say thank you to those of you that have been supporting the show. It's really, really humbling for me. My little girl comes in and tells me, like, Daddy, you only have 2 views. Daddy, you only have 3 views. So quite honestly, we've reached tens of thousands of people in just a month and a half, and it is terribly humbling and exciting. And we get a ton of questions sent in to True Crime Boss. And really the major question I keep getting is, do I think Bryan Kohberger is guilty? And interestingly enough, I just finished another documentary that'll air nationally in the winter on the Kohberger case. And I've been on Good Morning America whenever a motion is filed, just discussing the particular issue of the day. But even wrapping several hours of filming, I feel like everyone is focusing on the major pieces of evidence, which of course they're going to jump off the page. Bryan Kohberger's DNA was identified on the knife sheath from the home at Kings Road. Also, his vehicle was seen coming and going from the scene. His cell phone data tracks his movements that night. There is also a physical description that matches him as well. There's a couple of other items that go into the affidavit that kind of fall off to the side because they're not as salacious or as compelling as the items I just listed. However, folks, when you consider these items together, they're huge against Bryan Kohberger. And there's a couple little things you may have missed. Everybody talks about the famous body cam footage of Bryan Kohberger being pulled over on his trek across country for the Christmas holiday last year. He was stopped on his way, and that footage was released. But the affidavit of probable cause actually discusses 2 other vehicle stops of Bryan Kohberger. He was stopped twice when he was living out in Washington. He was stopped in August of 2022, and he was stopped in October of 2022, months prior to the murders. And you may ask, what does this have to do with what happened on November 13th, 2022? I'll tell you. Here's what's significant about those stops and why we begin our story there. Number 1, who is Bryan Kohberger? He's stopped by the police in August. And what does he give the officer? And they will present the body cam footage of these stops in court. He gives him his cell phone number, which ends with the last 4 digits, 8458. That is significant because when the investigation continues, they identify his vehicle, they have that information. Number 1, they know who Bryan Kohberger is. They know his physical description. Then they have his cell phone information. Then they know what kind of car he's operating, that white Hyundai Elantra. All of a sudden, this guy's starting to look at a minimum suspicious for this killing right from the jump. There's a second stop in October, again, where it's just Bryan operating that vehicle, alone in that vehicle. Again, significant. It's showing the jury that all the way back to August, it's just Bryan in his Elantra with his AT&T phone ending with the last 4 digits, 8458. This is not a criminal mastermind. This is not somebody with extreme resources. This is a single white male living in Washington on a teacher's assistant graduate student's budget, driving a 2015 Hyundai Elantra. You know, folks, I often use the expression that people look like their cars. I don't know, the second I say that to people, people start saying, well, wait, no, I don't look like my Dodge Caravan, or I promise you, your car is an expression on where you are in life. If you're a mom and you have several kids, you're probably driving a Caravan or a big SUV. Bryan Kohberger's car is really, it looks like him. Wouldn't you be shocked if Bryan Kohberger was found to be driving like a Softail Deuce Harley Davidson? I mean, this is the car of the guy who was living alone in Washington on a modest budget and eerily tracking these young, beautiful people at Kings Road through November of 2023. So that particular vehicle stop months prior to these killings is very significant. And it's part of our story. That big circle we're going to draw around Bryan Kohberger in that courtroom begins with those 2 vehicle stops. Also, folks, here's something I don't hear a ton of discussion about, but is very significant. The day after the murder, Bryan Kohberger is seen on video surveillance at Kate's Cup of Joe in Washington from their camera and the Albertson grocery store camera the following day. You may think, why is it significant where an alleged killer is the day after a killing? Because, folks, he's seen alone. He's seen driving that vehicle. And guess what? His cell phone data supports that he's in that very location yet again. What does that tell? What does that do for the prosecution? They could then say to the jury, here is a picture of Bryan Kohberger at Albertson's grocery store the day after the murder. Here is a cell phone record that supports that he's at that very location, which means our cell phone data is accurate. He's alone. His bushy eyebrows are with him. You see what I'm saying, folks? These 2 bookends of the affidavit support what happened on November 13th, 2023. You cannot consider this evidence in a vacuum. You have to draw that circle around and weave these pieces of evidence together. And when you look at the Albertson camera, it tells us so much, because if there's a doubt that cell phone data is not necessarily reliable, maybe Kohberger had somebody working with him, maybe he was driving another car during the time of the killings. Again, these actions and this evidence in the time period after the murders are admissible. They're certainly admissible because they're relevant. They show he's driving that